That's it. One hire. I mean, I agree. They go the scenic route. They finally bring in Mike Vrabel. This is the guy I wanted last offseason. Yeah. Crazy just how the timeline went. But let's bring him in right now. Doug Kyed of the Boston Herald, doing so much behind the scenes covering all of this. Doug, thanks for taking the time, man. I know it's a busy, busy day, but thanks for joining the show.
Absolutely. Anytime, George.
So, Doug, in less than, let's go back. It's January 2023. Patriots put out a press release that they're doing long-term. They're discussing contract negotiations to keep Jerod Mayo with the team long-term while Bill Belichick was a head coach. And that was pretty much him being baked in to being Belichick's successor.
Yep.
You go to January 2024. Jerod Mayo's announced as the next head coach. January 2025, it's now Mike Vrabel. What do you make of this decision by the Crafts and overall the timeline we've seen how this went? 3 head coaches in 3 years, all moving very quickly.
Yeah, certainly not the way I think the Crafts planned all of this. We've kind of heard ever since then that the plan was probably for Bill Belichick to be the head coach in 2023 and 2024. Then you pass the reins on to Jerod Mayo. That didn't work out. With back-to-back 4-13 seasons, Bill Belichick gets fired after 2023. Jerod Mayo gets fired after 2024. And now you've got Mike Vrabel in here. And I actually thought, Robbie, the call-in, made a good point. I actually am curious if, say, Mike Vrabel got hired in last year's cycle, what the Patriots actually do this offseason. I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could have kept Jerod Mayo for another season as their head coach. But with Mike Vrabel on the market still, available as a head coach, kind of that second guy that they might have been considering last offseason, it does become a little bit obvious because this isn't a guy that has to learn on the job. He knows what he's doing. He can bring in good assistants. He can bring in good coordinators. It just could be a completely different vibe from what the Patriots had last season. And it's kind of reminiscent in some ways of how the Patriots went from Bill Parcells to Pete Carroll to Bill Belichick in the 90s and 2000s, where you go from kind of a disciplinarian head coach to a player's head coach, back to a disciplinarian head coach. That's kind of what I see here now too. Mike Vrabel, obviously a former player, but also really no nonsense. So I think a lot of current Patriots players have to actually be on notice because of how different the vibe will be next season with Vrabel replacing Mayo.
I agree with you, Doug. Look, maybe it's the Libra in me, but I believe in balance. I think this guy is a perfect combo of both. Yes, he's a disciplinarian. Yes, he doesn't take any shack from anyone, but at the same time, he is a player's coach too. And we've heard that, going back to his time at Tennessee, players love Mike Vrabel. So I think he's a perfect blend of both. I just want to ask you, were you surprised at all at how seamless this was? The reason I'm asking you is because I am a little surprised. I felt like it was sort of cocky for Patriots fans to just think, oh, we'll get Vrabel. We should have did that a year ago anyways. I'm like, hey, the Bears is a great job. We hear reports that Brady was trying to get Vrabel to the Raiders. I mean, I'm just a little shocked at the other gigs that were available, maybe not having a little more input here and making it sort of a highest bidder type situation. It just seems like Vrabel was locked in on the Patriots and vice versa. Are you surprised by that? Because I was.
Not overly surprised, but I will also say that I heard about a month ago, might have been a little bit over a month ago, that Vrabel wanted this job, that if it was available, that he wanted to come back to New England. So that's the only reason why I'm not overly surprised about this. I would also say maybe it's the New England bias in me, but I also think that the Patriots job is probably the best out of all the head coaching opportunities. You've got the quarterback in Drake Maye. You've got $130 million in cap space. You've got the number 4 overall pick. Elliot Wolf's future as GM, maybe possibly up in the air, so you could even bring in some of your own front office guys. I don't think that the rest of the jobs out there might have had all of that the Patriots could offer. Like the Bears obviously have Caleb Williams, but not as good draft capital, not as good cap space. Ryan Poles seems pretty locked in right there. Jaguars don't necessarily have the ownership that the Patriots do. Bears don't have the ownership. So this did seem like it had everything that a head coach would want out of a job, especially if you're going into your second opportunity, because most head coaches don't get a third opportunity. So you really have to nail that second one.
I'll like you point out, Vrabel wanted the job a month ago. I feel like how quick everything moved with Jerod Mayo being fired an hour and a half after the season ended means the Patriots were locked in on Mike Vrabel before the last game of the season. Do you think that's what this outlook was? It feels like that's how the interview process went. Byron Leftwich, Pep Hamilton brought in to check the boxes of the Rooney Rule. Mike Vrabel and Ben Johnson were the only legit head coaching candidates that they actually interviewed. And then they interview Vrabel on Thursday, Ben Johnson on Friday. And Doug, what you reported in your article you put in the Herald on Sunday, that by Saturday, they start negotiations with Vrabel. How early on do you think the Kraft said, no, we're going to go out and hire Mike Vrabel, and maybe they got everything moving quick again with Jerod Mayo?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when that all started, but I would say that just knowing that Vrabel was out there available, I think did make the decision to move on from Jerod Mayo easier. That they probably had a good idea based on back channels that this is something that Vrabel would be interested in, that he was still out there, not going to be out there again next offseason. So then at that point, you have to decide, like, all right, do we fire Jerod Mayo now and then move forward on Vrabel, or do we risk losing Vrabel? He's not going to be available. See how this goes for another year. Might have to fire Jerod Mayo mid-season, which certainly is not an ideal possibility. So, yeah, I think that that's why this moved so quickly. I personally would have liked to have seen the Patriots take it a little bit more seriously. Maybe reach out to some more coaches, talk to some more people. Like even a guy like, some of the veteran head coaches out there, not saying they're going to hire Ron Rivera, but just see what he has to say, see what he thinks of the organization, see what he thinks of the structure, get some more like experienced guys in here just to be able to talk to, because you don't get these opportunities to talk to head coaches and talk to candidates again. And I didn't love the way that they satisfied the Rooney Rule as well. It felt like not only were they not taking the rule very seriously, but they were also essentially just skipping the line to be able to hire Mike Vrabel as quickly as possible, which is just kind of cheating the system. So, don't love the way that they got to this point, but I also do think that they hired the best guy for the job for this situation, because Ben Johnson would have been very fun to watch, would have been fun to see him work with Drake Maye, but I also think it would be a tough sell for Ben Johnson to be another first-year head coach, learning on the fly, having to bring in veteran coaches around him, and just hope that all of that goes better.
I like that ending point. I also like what you brought up with the coaching search, but let's start with Ben Johnson. Why, in your eyes, Mike Vrabel over Ben Johnson?
I think it is just the experience. Like Mike Vrabel, he's been around. He's been at Ohio State. He's been with the Texans. He's been with the Titans. Now he's been with the Browns. So he can assemble a good staff of veteran coaches. That's something that Jerod Mayo couldn't do. It's also something that Ben Johnson might struggle to do a little bit. But it is also just, having that experience of being a head coach before. I mentioned, like, he doesn't have to learn on the fly. Last year, Jerod Mayo really had to learn how to be a head coach while he was already a head coach. I think it's difficult to do. And I don't know how Ben Johnson would have even looked as a head coach. You know what you need out of Mike Vrabel. You know what you're getting. It brings a much higher floor. And right now, with the state of the Patriots organization, we saw what Gillette Stadium looked like in week 17 and week 18. It was half empty. You had boos. You had chants of fire Mayo. Like, if you don't bring that high floor, who knows when the fans are coming back at that point. Now, at least with Vrabel, you know that he can improve the team. He knows what he's doing. Might not be quite as high of a ceiling with Drake Maye, but it's just, like I said, that high floor that he can bring the organization back to respectability.
Doug, I got to ask you about Elliot Wolf, because, look, I think Elliot Wolf and Jerod Mayo should be paired together, as in both of you get to stepping out of here. And my thing is this. As the season went along, we saw the Patriots team regress in a lot of ways. In other words, we did not see improvement from the head coach. I understand that it's hard to see improvement, tangible improvement from a GM, but at the same time, Elliot Wolf's draft class gave you nothing outside of Drake Maye, who was an obvious choice at 3. So I don't even like giving him a ton of credit for drafting Drake Maye. That was an obvious choice. I guess two-part question. Do you sort of see it the same way I do with Elliot Wolf, A, and B, how do you think his fit will be with Mike Vrabel?
Yeah, Travis, it's a really good question. I personally have a hard time moving on from a GM after 1 year, just because I don't think that you're getting a great scope of what he can do. And obviously the draft class looks bad right now, but let's say like 2-3 years down the line, a lot of those guys start emerging, then you're like, Elliot, can you come back here? Like, Jalen Polk's not looking too bad. Caden Wallace isn't looking too bad. I also, obviously, Drake Maye definitely looked like the obvious choice there at number 3 overall, but Patriots did have trade down opportunities. I think that there are other GMs or head coaches around the league who might have taken those, grabbed a package, grabbed a quarterback a little bit further down the line. So I also do have a hard time, if I'm the organization, just saying like, hey, Elliot, thanks for Drake Maye. We'll see you later. Because like he did wind up getting them a franchise quarterback. So we'll see what happens with Elliot Wolf, because I do wonder how that fit's going to be with Mike Vrabel. It was somewhat of an arranged marriage with Jerod Mayo. Obviously, they had known each other since they had worked with the Patriots, but they weren't necessarily like a package deal. Neither one of them really picked each other. And now that's going to be the same thing with Mike Vrabel. But it does seem like Mike Vrabel is going to be able to bring in some of his own front office people. There's already been reports that Ryan Cowden's going to be coming in from the Giants. He worked with Mike Vrabel with the Titans. I had reached out to someone a few hours ago about Cowden, and I was told that it was the worst kept secret in the NFL that Vrabel wanted to bring him along to the Patriots. So whether that's going to be above Elliot Wolf, below Elliot Wolf, they are at least going to be bringing other people in. And listen, I know what Patriots fans think of Elliot Wolf. I know what I do personally think that it's harder to judge a GM after 1 year than it is to judge a head coach, because you're seeing the head coach week after week after week after week. With the GM, you're basically seeing the offseason, and then you don't see him again until the offseason. So definitely curious to see how this goes in year 2 for Elliot Wolf, as long as he does stay atop the front office.
Yeah, Ryan Cowden, reports coming from Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports that Ryan Cowden will be, in addition to the Patriots personnel mix, no GM title, and Elliot Wolf will retain personnel power in the building as well. Vrabel's choice, as you just said, Doug, is Ryan Cowden. How do you see that working out, though, with the leadership in the front office? Does that mean the Patriots still go out and get a general manager? Or is it going to be Ryan Cowden's the addition, and then Elliot Wolf still holds a lot of power leading the front office with Cowden, I suppose?
I really wouldn't be surprised if Vrabel winds up having a lot of personnel control as well. And maybe this becomes somewhat of a messy situation for the Patriots, where you've got the Patriot or like Kraft's guy at the top, Ryan Cowden below him, but Vrabel also having a say. So they really need to figure this out. They have to nail that down, figure out who's going to be credited, who's going to be to blame. But I also do think that, let's say that Elliot Wolf does keep that job atop the front office for this season, and if this year doesn't go great, I think that he would wind up then being the scapegoat. Then you probably wind up promoting Ryan Cowden. But one more thing just on Wolf, and the draft, some of the free agency moves, a lot of them 100% deserves the blame. I don't think that the coaching staff from last year can be forgotten as well, just because there really wasn't a lot of player development within the Patriots last season, especially at wide receiver. The offensive line was a mess. Basically from the time that staff was hired in February or March or whatever it was, I was looking at being like, oh God, this is going to be a mess. Like, this is a lot of guys in their first year on roles, and that really played out last season. So definitely also curious to see what that 2024 draft class looks like with actual position coaches, developing them and teaching them this season.
So I want to go back to the article that you and Andrew Callahan put out in the Herald. You go back, what was it, a week ago? It's all moved so fast, but it
was like 3 days.
Right. Thank you. It's so detailed. It has so much key info behind the curtain. Like, you and Andrew, as always, do an excellent job covering the team. And you give Patriots fans and people that cover it like us so much more perspective to it. Elliot Wolf, in that article, you guys said Elliot Wolf did help in hiring the coaching staff, like an Alex Van Pelt. So there's a first-time head coach, D coordinator, offensive coordinator, wide receivers, linebackers, offensive line coach, special teams coordinator as well. Maybe I'm missing one from there. But to all that, you bring up the coaching didn't help with the development. Is Elliot Wolf, did he have as much say in hiring that coaching staff as we see from reading that? Or was it still he doesn't deserve full blame on that? Because to me, that's a huge red flag in his tenure as well. You brought in all these inexperienced guys from your overlaps with the Packers and the Browns, and it didn't pay any dividends at all for the Patriots.
It was basically like Elliot Wolf was kind of forced to do some of those hires just because Jerod Mayo knew no one. So Van Pelt was definitely an Elliot Wolf guy because they had known each other from think the Packers and maybe also the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was a lot of guys on staff, like Tyler Hughes, the wide receivers coach. He had been with the Patriots before. Obviously, Dante Hightower, the linebackers coach, he was a Jerod Mayo guy. DeMarcus Covington was a Jerod Mayo guy. Offensive line coach Scott Peters, he came from the Browns, so he would be more of an Elliot Wolf guy. So it definitely is, about half and half. But I would say that in most cases, you want that staff to be assembled by a head coach, because they're the ones who are going to be working with them every day. In this case, it was almost forced for the GM to have to use his connections to hire guys. And I think it was also an element where there was a lot of coaches around the NFL who were like, I don't know if I want to join this team with a first-year head coach. Seems very inexperienced. We don't know anything about him. I think that's one of the reasons why they were having such a hard time, especially finding an offensive coordinator, just because there was no one who really wanted to take that job. And in the grand scheme of things, they were making the right choices, because now Alex Van Pelt did take the job, and he's probably going to be out of that job after a year.
I think it's a great point that you make in all of that for looking at the staff first-year head coach. What you get with Mike Vrabel, played for 14 years, has been coaching between Ohio State, the Texans, and the Titans, of course, since 2011. So, A, how sought after is now being an assistant for Mike Vrabel? B, Doug, who's his offensive coordinator going to be?
It's certainly a lot more sought after than, like, let's say the Patriots had kept Jerod Mayo, but fired Alex Van Pelt and DeMarcus Covington. That was a popular scenario at the end of the year. I don't know who they would have found to be the offensive coordinator or even the defensive coordinator, knowing that they might be out of a job in like 7 months, 8 months, whatever it would be. So now with Vrabel, I think that it is much more highly sought after, especially with Drake Maye at quarterback. So I think that OC job certainly could be sought after. There's been a lot of reports that Josh McDaniels could wind up being the OC choice. I think that's a safe one. It's kind of what I was saying earlier, where it's like kind of a high floor, maybe not necessarily the highest ceiling. But I mean, the last time Josh McDaniels was the offensive coordinator in New England, the Patriots ranked 6th in scoring that season in 2021. And that was with Mac Jones at quarterback, not a lot of talent otherwise on the team. So certainly wouldn't be the worst choice if it is Josh McDaniels. I know he stayed local, so it would be easy for him. He knows Mike Vrabel from their time with the Patriots. But some other guys to look at, Tommy Rees, he was with the Browns last year with Mike Vrabel. He's been the offensive coordinator at Notre Dame and in Alabama. He's kind of like a younger, hotter offensive coordinator candidate. And just some of the typical guys that are out there otherwise. Josh McCown, he's a quarterbacks coach right now, so he could take the job. Nick Caley was one who turned down the offensive coordinator job last year. He's still hanging around with it with Rams. Tim Kelly and Todd Downing, those are two guys who worked with Mike Vrabel. Those are also kind of lower ceiling type guys. And then Ken Dorsey was just fired by the Browns. I know how, not the greatest possibility there, but he had some success with the Bills in the past, helping to develop Josh Allen. And then you could throw Alex Van Pelt in there as well. I don't think that he'll wind up probably retaining the job, but he did a good job with Drake Maye last year. Wouldn't be the worst thing to keep the same kind of offense intact, which is something that would be the case with Tommy Rees or even with Ken Dorsey, since they would be coming from the Browns. A lot of the same terminology would carry over for May for a lot of the younger offensive players. But I don't know. I'm really curious to see if they can get an even better candidate, bigger candidate. I'd like to go as creative as possible with that role just to see what the Patriots could unleash with Drake Maye at quarterback.
Doug, it's crazy. You named all those names, and I want McDaniels out of all of them. I mean, like literally, like out of all those names, I was just waiting for someone that was more intriguing than McDaniels. I couldn't find one. I want to ask you about the identity of this team, because my biggest beef with the Jerod Mayo era, as short as it was, is that he never established an identity or a culture with this team. And I know, just from Mike Vrabel's background and the fact that Vrabes was a player here, that overnight now, like literally tomorrow morning, your culture is set. You have an identity. You're tougher. You're not going to make as many mistakes in terms of penalties and turning the ball over and things of that nature. Clock management at the end of the game is going to be managed much better. You're buttoned up, if you will. Talk to me about what you see in the Vrabel, sort of the difference between Mayo and Vrabel's Patriots.
Yeah, I think that Vrabel's just going to be a lot more direct. Like, no one's going to be doubting what he means, what vision he has set, what he wants from players. With Mayo, it was really like a player-led team, but they didn't necessarily have the veteran leadership to be a veteran-led team. And I mean, even in the piece that Andrew and I wrote, you had people saying that, like, he kept talking about these North Stars and was like, all right, well, are you going to share them with us? Can you tell them what they are? What is the goal here? What is the identity here? So I really don't think that there's going to be any question about what the Patriots' identity is. I think that was one of the strengths that Mike Vrabel had. And, players do, like you were saying before, Travis, like, he is a player's coach.
Yeah.
But he's also not going to let the players run the show. Like, I think that some of the quotes that we were seeing from players really throughout the season, whether it was the wide receivers, whether it was Jelani Tavai about the fans, whether it was Devon Godshaw kind of always, deflecting blame from the defense, those are things that I think will go away because now you have a head coach in place that, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not going to say that players are going to be like fearful of him, but they also are going to know what the limits are. And that was another thing that I was hearing a lot last year is that, like, players were just never really told what the line was, especially when speaking to the media, whereas, like, people kept waiting for Jerod Mayo to step in and be like, all right, this is the line. Do not cross this line. That will be a lot more evident now with Mike Vrabel as head coach.
It may not be fear, but at least they're going to respect him. And nothing against Jerod Mayo again, but like
respect.
Mike Vrabel comes with the confidence, obviously the experience. He's done it before. He's played it. He's been there. He knows it. The respect will go a long way in establishing the culture. A quote that jumped out to me when the news broke, Teddy Bruschi was talking on ESPN. He said this, Doug. Quote, I'm a little bit surprised that this happened because there are some people upstairs in the organization that want to be heard. Sometimes they're going to have to take a little bit of humble pie and understand your opinion doesn't matter on this one because there are people in the building that know more. Do you think that could apply to ownership, maybe to a Jonathan Kraft, or do you think that's more towards a front office when you hear that, Doug?
It's really interesting. Obviously, I don't know what Teddy Bruschi or who Teddy Bruschi is specifically referring to there. If it is ownership, it would be Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft. Obviously, Robin Glazer is very high up in the organization as well. He's someone, or she's someone that Bill Belichick is constantly referencing these days. Or it could be front office. It could be Elliot Wolf or Matt Groh or anyone else atop that organization. But at least this does give one voice to the organization. Like, this is now going to be a Mike Vrabel team. Whereas in the past, and maybe they still, try to have the three pillars like ownership, front office, coaching, but this is going to be a Mike Vrabel team. Whereas last year, there really wasn't that one voice. And it probably should have been Jerod Mayo since he was the most front-facing person in the organization. But at the same time, like, not to criticize or rehash a lot of these things over and over again, because this is a new era now, but like, everyone talked about it. Like, Jerod Mayo would say something on Sunday and then have to walk it back on Monday. And that's not what you want out of the voice in your organization. And that's another thing the Patriots just aren't going to have to worry about with Mike Vrabel. When he says something, he's going to mean it. And he's experienced enough in this role and experienced enough with the media to know what he should and shouldn't say in those situations.
All right, we're all excited to have Raves as a new coach. We're so back. That's how we started this interview, right? But just to play devil's advocate for the sake of conversation, I mean, is it fair to have concerns about Drake Maye's development at this point now? Because for one, I was banging the drum. George was with me too. We were fine with Raves, but we were very open to the idea of Ben Johnson, particularly for Drake Maye's continued evolution. Can I look at this now, this Vrabel as a head coach, as, oh, here we go, same old Patriots, are going to be defense, they're going to run the ball. Drake Maye's not going to get developed in the right way. They're not going to get real weapons here. Kind of 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I mean, even Vrabel, think about this, Doug. Vrabel's most success as a head coach was with a veteran quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. Like, we've never seen him develop some young kid. So, playing devil's advocate, is it fair to have some concerns about Drake Maye's development under Vrabel's leadership? Is that fair, Doug?
Yeah, the biggest concern here is that Mike Vrabel actually did develop two offensive coordinators into head coaches, but that just meant that they left the organization. Like, Matt LaFleur goes over the Green Bay Packers, Arthur Smith goes over the Falcons. So you're having to start over with new offensive coordinators under a defensive-minded head coach like Mike Vrabel. if Josh McDaniels is his OC, maybe you don't have to worry about that, because I'm doubtful that a team is going to give Josh McDaniels a third chance as a head coach, no matter how well he does with Drake Maye. But let's say you do bring in Tommy Rees, or let's say you do bring in Josh McCown, and they're able to turn this Patriots offense into a top 10 unit, and Drake Maye is looking like a top 5, top 10 quarterback. That guy is going to be the most popular head coaching candidate in a year or two. And then that's the point where you have to start over and keep going. And you saw it with Vrabel with the Titans, where like they have success with LaFleur, they have success with Arthur Smith, but then by the time that you're down to Todd Downing, that offensive success goes away. They really start struggling on offense. Then they go 6-11 and Mike Vrabel is fired. So it's tough. Like, you'd want that younger, more creative offensive coordinator, but if he's good at his job, he's going to be leaving in a few seasons. Whereas if you bring in kind of a more veteran guy like Josh McDaniels, maybe you don't have as high of a ceiling, but at least you allow Drake Maye to develop under him. So in an ideal world, you would want an offensive-minded head coach who could develop with Drake Maye for the next 15 years or whatever it is. But it didn't work out that way. I do still think that this is the best place for this organization to go at head coach. And whether it's with McDaniels or one of these other offensive coordinators, you're just going to have to figure it out and kind of take what you can with the offensive coordinator situation. But that is the most concerning thing about Vrabel, is just that you are probably going to have some turnover in those coordinator roles if he's hiring the right guys.
Doug, last question for me. It's more of a statement, I guess. I've been in such of a glass case of emotion surrounding this Jerod Mayo stuff, because when he got hired, I was excited. First black head coach in Patriots history. This is awesome. And then he stunk up the joint. You know, I couldn't defend him from what I was watching as the season went along. But now the reports of everything that went wrong that you know well and you've helped right, and now I look and it's like this guy is public enemy number one. I mean, my goodness, he did play here, right? It doesn't feel like now with Robert Kraft, as much as he loves Jerod Mayo, it sure doesn't seem like they're doing right by him now. What happens to Jerod Mayo? I do not see the same kind of energy of let's give this guy a chance. Let's support this guy. Let's stand by him. And then when everything goes to hell in a handbasket, everyone's turned their back on this guy, and I'm seeing slander all over the timeline. So what happens with Jerod Mayo? How can he even get experience now, Doug? I mean, is anyone even going to give him a chance?
It's a really good question. And, I would like to see, Jerod Mayo brought back at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. I think that Patriots fans, not as a coach, but brought back to the stadium to honor him, to do something for him, because I do think that Patriots fans will forgive and forget at a certain point with him. But just as far as his next role, it's a really good question, because he's never been a coordinator. So I could see a situation where, I know people have brought this up before, with Mike Tomlin when he hired Brian Flores as a linebackers coach. Get him back going, develop him as a coach, let him get the public perception, improves a little bit. Then Brian Flores goes to the Vikings, becomes a DC, and now he's a head coaching candidate. So maybe something similar happens with Jerod Mayo, where a veteran coach brings him in as a position coach, lets him develop for a year or two, then he gets hired away as a defensive coordinator, and then maybe say 5-10 years down the line, when he's ready to be a head coach, then maybe those possibilities start coming up for him again. But I am really curious, because he's only been a coach for 5 years. So I think this is also something where it's I have no idea what he's feeling right now, what he's thinking, what he wants to do. But I think he also has to answer that question of do I want to keep coaching? Because he got a good contract. He's got the Patriots have to keep paying him. So he's not really in a rush monetarily to go somewhere. He made a lot of money as a player. So that's really on him, whether he wants to start building back up to whether he wants to be a head coach again, or if he just decides to do something different. But the best possibility for him to build himself back up as a candidate is probably taking that same route that Brian Flores did.
I like that you bring that all up on what the future of Jerod Mayo can be. Hey, Doug, final one for me. With Mike Vrabel now being the head coach, he's coming off a season where he was with the Browns as a coaching and personnel consultant.
Right.
So he saw how the Browns front office runs things and removed Deshaun Watson from it, because that was something forced on ownership by the Browns. But they've drafted so well, defensive line, tackles, cornerback. They knew how to add the right receivers.
Great
Look at how
roster.
they built their quarterback room to keep that offense afloat. I say all that Do you think Mike Vrabel, getting that experience in Cleveland, now that he accepts his job with the Patriots, is saying the Patriots are going to get more modern with how they approach personnel evaluation, and I would say just overall resources in a front office and a coaching staff? More money, more people, more bodies, because the job is so difficult now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to know if that was part of his interview to be requesting some of those things. And I mean, and he's a guy like he's never coached here. He's never been in personnel here. So like, I think that he is someone, since he has so much outside experience, to be like, no, this isn't the way things are done around the NFL. We need to modernize things. We need to change things. So I think that that's something else that he brings, where it's like, yeah, people look at him as just being like, all right, the Crafts want to just go with someone that they know, someone who's been with the Patriots before. But that was certainly the case with Jerod Mayo, where he didn't know any better. He had only coached and played in New England, hadn't been with another team since he was in college at Tennessee. Whereas Vrabel knows how things work in the NFL quite a bit better based on all of his stuff. So that would certainly be the hope, that that's part of this for Vrabel, that he took the job with some of those assurances, but we'll just kind of have to see how it goes. I do think it's a good sign that the Patriots already are, reportedly willing to bring in a guy like Ryan Kyed to a position that might not even be known yet at this point. Like, that title might not even be known, but they're just saying like, hey, listen, we're willing to add more bodies. We're willing to pay for someone that you want to come in and help this front office.
Great answer there. Here's Doug Kyed of the Boston Herald. Doug, as always, thanks for hopping on the show. You do a great job covering the team. Everyone, make sure to stay locked in with what him and Andrew Callahan bring to the Patriots beat coverage. All the guys down there in Gillette. Excited to hear what you're reporting from his introductory presser Monday afternoon as well. Doug, thanks for taking the time, man.
Absolutely. Anytime, George. Anytime, Travis.